I'd like to call to order the Middletown City Council meeting for Tuesday, February 21st, 2023. If we could start with a movement of meditation, please, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Skank, will you please call the roll for us?
Mr. Farrell?
Here.
Miss Nenny? Mr. Moon?
Here.
Mr. Muterspaw?
Here.
Mayor Condrey?
Here.
Make that motion to excuse. Mom.
You all.
I'd make a motion to excuse Miss Ninny.
Second.
I don't actually know why she's not here, so I'm not. She hasn't been asked. She didn't ask to be. Oh, good. I was like, she'll show up, certainly. So we'll give it a moment. Okay.
I withdraw my motion.
I was just telling Rick McCrabb, dogs and kids never behave when you need them to, and my dog would not come inside. I'm so sorry I'm late. Here?
Just note for the record, Ms. Nitty has joined the meeting. Okay, great. First, we have this evening a public hearing on CDBG. Do we have?
Thank you. Mayor Condrey and members of council, I'd like to introduce Mindy Mueller, President and CEO of Community Development Professionals, and she is here to present our 2023-2024 CDBG Annual Action Plan. Mindy? There she is.
Good evening, Mindy.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity again to talk with you about the plan and what we have recommended for the 23-24 year moving forward. Is the presentation on here? Okay. Do we want to do the public hearing first or just do the presentation? Or?
He's working on it. He's trying to get
We
it.
will have you speak,
There
and
we
then we'll open the public hearing for comments.
Okay, I gotcha.
Brody, does that sound accurate as to how we proceed? Okay, just making sure.
Sorry. Yep.
Mindy, thank you for your email response. I'm seeing some of the answers here. Appreciate it.
Good question.
Can you sing or something? It's just real quiet in here. It echoes well.
There's good acoustics in there, for sure.
Seeing as we have one citizen comment this evening, what do you think about doing our citizen comment and then moving to the public hearing?
Yeah.
That way we're
Maybe
not
we
wasting anybody's
Move
time.
to citizens' comment.
Okay. We have one citizen comment this evening, Bob Nolan. If you can come up to the dais, state your name and address for the record. I'll do the timer. Don't worry about that up there.
No worries.
And
Bob
we
Nolan,
got 4 minutes for you.
2515 El Camino Drive here in Middletown. Good evening, Madam Mayor. Esteemed, we'll throw Rodney in there with that. Esteemed members of council,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Lawley, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I want to address something right up front. This last week, there's been a lot of emails back and forth between some of us, and I'm going to say and admit that it got a little heated at times. But I learned something through that process, and what that is that it shows we all are all in the same boat on this. What all of us want is what is best for the city of Middletown. And don't take that passion as in any way a ding on any of you for anything you've done. Because I'll tell you, I lived here for 14 years and I left for 10. And when that ended, I came back to Ohio. I could have gone anywhere in this region, but I came back to Middletown because I love this city. It's an amazing city. It's not a monolithic community like some of our neighbors are. We're a vibrant city with people from every socioeconomic place and point in life. We have every race represented. We have a great community. It's time to start capitalizing on some of those things. I want to commend Mr. Muterspaw and Mr. Lawley for their, not just their current service in their positions, but a lifetime of commitment to this city. It truly means a lot to me, and we can never really repay them for what they've done. So shifting gears a little bit, after some conversation today, I don't guess we have a lot of choice on the airport hangar thing. We kind of got to do what we got to do, so let's just get on with it. But there's a point I'd like to make is that we're dealing with that now because, as the Bible would call it, and I'm a preacher, so you're just going to have to put up with that, is it the sins of the fathers? Much of this council's time is being eaten up with the correction of the past, when what we really should be doing is looking towards the creation of that path forward that'll make us a wonderful community again. I want you to know that I support each and every one of you, regardless of what you may think of the tenor of my comments at times. Sometimes I'm just kind of live blogging as I'm watching a city council meeting and I just send it to you unedited. So don't worry there. But I rise tonight specifically in support of the East End development, inclusive and exclusive of, what would we call it today, the entertainment destination. I think that's the only thing we can call it. But I think that's going to be the defining moment for this community for the next 3 to 4 decades to come. What we do with that end of the city is going to make a huge difference. Now, I do have a distaste anytime we spend public dollars on private enterprise. I'm a conservative, hardcore guy. I can't help it. I don't like choosing winners and losers, but I think it's time to pass this thing and light a fire under the developers to get this thing going. I know the government moves at a pace that would make a snail seem like a bullet train. But Middletown's future is so radically different from its past that while we can't make up for every bad decision that's ever been made, we can chart that course forward. That will get us to the point where we can refill the city coffers by getting the city back to work and changing the perception of Middletown to one of a vibrant, thriving community. Not as it once was, because those days are gone, but have a new image, a new perception, and a new vision. Because we are the last piece of the I-75 corridor between Dayton and Cincinnati, and commerce is on a collision with us whether we like it or not. This may be our last chance to have it the way we want it, not the way other people tell us it has to be. So before I go, I want you to know that each and every one of you are in my prayers daily. My prayer is that God would guide your paths to make the right decisions, not just for you, not just for me, but for all 50,000 residents of our fair city, to keep our community safe, to keep our city secure, to keep our citizenry strong. I don't think any of you are here by accident. I believe you've been put here by God to lead this city. I want to thank each and every one of you personally for your service to our city. Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, it looks like we have our presentation for the public hearing. Okay, we'll move back to that. Thanks for the flexibility, everyone.
Okay, I just want to give you kind of an overview, a little bit of a history of CDBG funds and the annual action plan that I stand here and present about this time every year. If you could do the next slide, please. Just a little bit of a background. The city is what they call an entitlement community with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. and you get a certain allocation, a formula allocation of CDBG dollars every year. There is a plan that is done over a 5-year period, and we did one in 20 that kind of led the path for what we're going to do over the next 5 years. All of the activities that we do with CDBG funds have to align with this plan, the city's path for what is designated these CDBG funds to do. The funds overall are supposed to create strong, sustainable, inclusive communities and affordable housing. That's what HUD charges us to do as a city. Next slide, please. So the CDBG funds, or Community Development Block Grant funds, can be used for a lot of different needs. And in that 5-year plan that we develop is where we start prioritizing how we're going to spend those dollars. It's a limited amount of money. There's a lot of things that we could do, but our anticipated award for this next year is that $675,000. And so it's a lot of money, but it's not enough money to do everything we would like to do. The city also gets an allocation of what we called home money, which is specific to housing. And Middletown is with Butler County in a consortium, and we partner with them. They do some of the administration. It's included in their 5-year plan. Middletown's portion is, so it acts a little bit differently, but you do get an allocation every year, and our anticipated allocation for home dollars this year is $326,000. Next slide, please.
That's just Middletown, right? That's not?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So CDBG is government money. It has lots of strings attached to it, even though it does have some flexibility. There are national objectives we have to meet with these dollars, and you can see those outlined here. Benefit low to moderate income households in the city of Middletown, prevent slums or blight, or address urgent community needs, which is really disaster response. Not urgent the way we may see something as urgent, but a disaster response is what they mean by that. CDBG has to be used for certain eligible activities. So there is some HUD regulation around what we can spend it on. And they look at certain thresholds, one of those being that not less than 70% of our funds have to benefit low to moderate income persons. They're looking to turn these lower income communities and have these funds benefit those communities. There are some caps on the funds, and one of those is on public service, what they define as public service. So these are the things that are the social service activities in the community is what they define as public service, and there's a limit to how much we can spend on public services, 15% of our allocation. Next slide, please. So again, with home, we're in a consortium with Butler County, which means you have autonomy to choose how you want to use those home dollars, but there's a more limited amount of activities that can be used for home, and we don't include home in your annual action plan that goes with Butler County, and that's not yet been decided. Their plan's not yet on the table. But eligible activities for home include rehab of owner-occupied housing, assistance to home buyers, acquisition, rehab or construction of rental housing, tenant-based rental assistance, things that are in that housing area is what home has to be used for. But it has to benefit low and moderate income households, all of it does. So home's a little bit different than CDBG in that flexibility. Next slide, please. So a little bit of our planning process. Everything is very regimented with this process. Again, we did a 20 to 25 consolidated plan. That was a 5-year plan. Before we presented that plan, we did lots of community conversations, lots of interviews, held public hearings. That's the time we really dig in and get the community's input, the stakeholders' input on what we want to prioritize in this 5-year plan. The annual action plan then is steps on how we're going to move that forward every year. So this is year 4 of that action plan, and our program year for this CDBG fund starts May 1 and runs through April 30th. So we're getting ready to enter year 4 of that action plan. Next slide, please. So one of the things we have to do that HUD requires is that once citizen participation and comments, and so we have to allow time for that. We do public hearings to allow people to come and express their opinions. We also have a 30-day comment period where people can email or they can come in and talk. They can give responses to what has been proposed as the plan that will be submitted to HUD. So all comments have to be integrated into the plan, whether they're oral or in writing. And that copy of the plan is out there now. Our actual 30-day comment period starts tomorrow. We have to advertise that, and so we have done that. And then this would suffice as the public hearing ahead of submission of that plan. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the consolidated plan is where we outline the priorities, and there were 9 priorities that were identified by the community and that were put forth in that plan. Housing activities was one of those priorities. You can see some of the things that were presented under that category. Down payment assistance, which we do use home dollars for. Incentivize work-live households. There was conversation around changing the renters to homeowners in the community and changing the balance of that. Repair and rehab of existing homeowners. Again, looking specifically at the low-income homeowner and making sure they can stay in their homes. And then also having some looking at competitive housing stock, so what that would look like in the community. So housing activities was one priority. A second was workforce development. There's been an ongoing kind of conversation that we need workers that are ready to work. And so that was one of the priorities. The third was fair housing activities. This is HUD, and fair housing is really important to HUD, but it also was important when we did the consolidated planning process and was one of the priority areas. Next slide, please. We also had youth activities and centers. Things for kids to do was one of the priority areas. General social services, mental health, substance use disorder treatment were 2 of the areas that were mentioned in that process. Removal of blight, street resurfacing, beautification, park improvements. These were things that are visible to the eye, were one of the things that was high on the priority list. And then really making sure we focus on low and moderate income neighborhoods. And Oakland was really identified as the first of those neighborhoods to be focused on. Next slide, please. So we do every year a request for proposal to provide community organizations an opportunity to participate and get some of these CDBG dollars to help the city meet these goals. We advertised that and disseminated those RFPs. December 2nd and 9th is when it was published. We also put it on the city's social media and on the city's website, and then sent emails out to lots of the Middletown nonprofits to make sure we could get that out to as many people as possible. Those were due January 27th of this year. There were 7 proposals that were received, and we're recommending 6 of those activities move forward in this annual action plan. Next slide, please. So these were what was submitted and the requests that were made and the amounts.
Minnie, can I ask a question? How was that communicated out?
How the request for proposal?
Yes.
We have to advertise it, legal ad in the paper. The HUD requires that. And then we send an email we have probably 40 different nonprofits in Middletown that we send that to let them know it's available, ask people to share that. It's included in some of the city's social media. It's on the website, just to make sure people understand that it's available. So we try to get that out to as many different partners as we can so that there's a wide understanding that it's available.
Okay. I don't think we're probably doing a very good job of communicating that. I think there's only 7 proposals up there, and I hear stuff all the time from nonprofits that they're wanting to do things, and it seems like a little bit of a broken record every year. Mm-hmm. We're approving 6 out of 7. I would expect us to have more than that. I know there's a lot of people trying to fulfill a lot of these roles in the community. I just don't think we're getting that message out as well as we can, just as a item of feedback.
I hear you. These were the RFPs that were submitted. There were 2 projects submitted from CBI, one for workforce development and one for their Cradle to Career, which focuses largely on youth. HOME, which is Housing Opportunities Made Equal, which is a fair housing provider in this region. PWC is People Working Cooperatively. Legal Aid, next slide please. SELF, and then BCRTA. Those were the 7 proposals received at those amounts. Next slide please. So the recommended activities, what we do is we look at those proposals, make sure they check all the boxes. There's, it's quite a stack of information they have to provide. That's what HUD mandates. We're looking for how does this fit with the plan that the city has developed and put forth, the priorities, eligibility of what they're asking for, and then considering how much money do we have to spend. In years past, with the largest group of proposals that have been received are in that public service category, and there's a cap on that. And so we have to take that into consideration. There's just 101,000 and some change on public services that we're able to spend. So the ones that were submitted and at the amounts that we were able to verify that this moves the plan forward plus is eligible, this is what we were recommending to the city. Continuing the emergency home repair, both for self and PWC at their requested amounts of 20 and 50 respectively. Park improvements at Oakland Park. Next slide, please. Fair housing activities for home and legal aid. Again, fair housing is a priority that HUD has, and both of these have been providers of fair housing activities for some time. Community youth activities through CBI and workforce development through CBI. These were the requested amounts, or the amounts we are suggesting, the recommended amounts. Next slide, please. So this is the annual budget plan that we're asking for the city to consider putting forth in the annual action plan. It's all the ones that I just mentioned, except the park improvement in the previous slide was not correct at 50, because it's 369, 384. Oakland Park has been on the radar for some time to try and do some visible improvements there, and so that's where the lion's share of that is going, is that in that line item. So that's our recommendation. I did want to mention that BCRTA had a very strong proposal. They're doing a whole lot to try and move some things forward. Their ask was for 100, and the cap on public services is just barely over that. So it wasn't any reflection on their project. It was just a matter of where the cap ends up. And so if we can help find some other dollars to help them with their project, I think that's a project that's worthy of considering. It just doesn't fit in what we're able to do with these dollars.
Question, and this might have been, I was trying to read through your email while walking in here, so I couldn't get all through it, but I was just curious, is it like in the past where the administrative fee, which is substantial, that's paid out of the grant, correct? That's not paid out of our budget general fund, or?
That's correct.
Okay, so it's all tax dollars, but it's not paid out of our general fund,
That's
but out
correct.
of, okay, so that hasn't changed.
Yep.
Okay, all right.
So the administrative fees of this program are $135,195 a year. I understand that we're allowed to use up to 20%, but this is 20%, maxing it out.
Yeah.
I would expect a lot more out of that. I don't feel like we're getting enough out of that. Honestly, this is the second time in the last 3 or 4 years. There's no Facebook posts about those grants. I just looked. It's not. So I don't know where we're not getting any feedback from citizens. We only had 7 proposals. I feel like it's a lot of money, and just because we're allowed to spend 20% on a federal program, I don't like to see dollars wasted, and I don't feel like we're getting 20% of that worth. So I feel like there's more work that could be done on this, because there's a lot of great programs, there's a lot of great opportunity in Middletown, but this is not the first time where I'm not seeing the communications working, and that is part of what's falling under that grant, is to make sure that we're communicating everything. So that's one of my biggest criticisms about this program and how it's working, is we're not communicating it sufficiently. If we're not getting any feedback at the sessions, nobody is showing up, it's not the citizens' fault.
I hear you.
So anyway, that's just my kind of frustration reading through a lot of stuff.
I hear you.
Just a question, kind of branching a little bit off that. If looking at forward to next year, if there's folks that want to apply next year that aren't sure where to reach out to because they haven't applied before and they need some hand-holding, is it you? Is it city staff? Where would a nonprofit reach out to?
They can certainly reach out to us, but all of the communications are going through Ashley.
Okay.
And then to us, we want to make sure that the city's in the loop on those communications. So I think, I hear what you're saying about needing to do a better job of getting in front of people. It is frustrating because there is a lot of communication happening, but that's not reflected in what we're receiving back. So I think you're right. I think we could do more with that. And if you'd like to talk more about the contract and what goes into that, I'm happy to have that conversation.
Then my only second question, it might be more for staff, is I'd love to hear a little bit more about the Oakland improvements. I'm really excited. I'm really happy that's in there. We've been talking about that for a long time. Would just love, it doesn't have to be at this meeting, could be a future meeting, just a little bit more a deeper dive on that, just so, the community can know what they can expect in the next 12 months on that.
And that is coming
Thank you.
forward in the future.
I know one of my questions in the email and the lengthy back and forth was the statistics and just metrics, I guess, being collected. And the responses said, yeah, there's metrics. I would love for council to see the metrics on these programs. I think that would be very beneficial, because otherwise we just keep putting money in it and like anecdotally hearing that things are going well. But I don't like to just go on anecdotal.
Yeah, no, I understand that. We do a public hearing at the performance report review in the summer. And then there is a caper that you all have access to and approve before it goes to HUD. But I think if we could, give you something more on a routine basis, we're getting, for some of the subrecipients, which are the nonprofits, what we call them in HUD land, we are getting those regularly. When they do a draw, they're sending a performance report. We have lots of data. So whatever amount of data would be something that you would want, we can provide. And that's all available. That's part of our role, is making sure that they're spending their money the way they should, and that they're meeting their metrics, that they are doing what they need to do. We do on-site visits with them. So we're getting paper. We're also in constant communication. We want them to be able to perform well and give them the support that they need to do that. So whatever we can provide to you in way of information, happy to do that. We definitely have the information. You just may not be getting it as regularly and not in this format, something a little bit more digestible. We can certainly do that.
Yeah, I see a lot of issues that come up to council, or things that we're being asked to spend money on, or sometimes council members come up with ideas to spend money on, and they all fall within potential CDBG budget items. And so that's why I want us to make sure we're talking about that. I mean, even things like access to aquatics. I mean, these are all programmatic things that could fall under CDBG dollars, but we don't creatively think of that, and then we just kind of let this RFP process happen through an ad in the newspaper and the list of people who've applied in the past, and that's it, and we just...
It is a broad list that we send to. So it isn't just the 7 or 8 that receive the current allocations. It does get frustrating from the nonprofit's perspective when there's a cap on public service, because so many of them need public service dollars, and that is one of the limitations of these funds. So I agree that we could probably do more, but I do hear from nonprofits, that that's just limited. That is the area that they need funds, and there's just a limit on how much we can support them. But if there's ways that we can do that better, we certainly need to talk about doing that.
Yeah, I guess that's why we only have 7 applications. It just doesn't make sense to me. And the other thing is, we had talked about using some ARPA dollars for some nonprofits, and so I'd like to see one application that didn't get approved. I mean, just so that we can be thinking of that. I don't know if we've got a process for applying for the ARPA dollars, but I'd like to at least see what was proposed that didn't get passed.
Sure.
Mindy, how do we rank in terms of the 7 proposals we received with other like cities? Is that 7 very low? Is it?
I would say it's on the lower end, but your allocation isn't as high as some other communities. If you're getting $1 million, you have a lot more money that you're able to give out. You're going to get more applications for those dollars.
Yeah, and we'll investigate and look into, see if this was put on the city's website and how the city put out the information.
Do you also find that there are any deterrents in the application process itself, that there is some reason why maybe a nonprofit would say, oh, okay, we maybe talk to a nonprofit and say, hey, look into these CDBG dollars, but then they get in there and they start looking and they don't meet the requirements, or they, that there's some cap, like, we've been talking about, if maybe there's something in the process or in the, requirements of those nonprofits that make them ineligible for
We
for
do an
use of the
information
dollars.
meeting, and it's not greatly attended. I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's not understanding, and maybe it's a lack of seeing the RFP. But that's the attempt to try and answer those questions. It has everything it has to have for HUD's purposes, but it's not overly daunting, and we're willing to come alongside and help with that process. We want good projects, as long as we don't, cut that line of helping write it, and making sure we have a boundary there. But we want good projects, and so we do offer that assistance. And we did have that last year with some that needed that more, they weren't as familiar, and we could sit and talk with them or help them through that process. But if there are other things we can do, we certainly need to look at that.
Yeah, and I know that as a council, when we sit and look at our ARPA money and figure out how we're gonna allocate all of that, and even our annual budget fund, surpluses, how do we decide where that goes every year? And it's tough, and sometimes sometimes a project makes it this year, and maybe another project gets pushed off to next year. I mean, this Oakland project is something that's gonna be great, but maybe there's something that could fill that, fill that place next year that is just as, so don't lose hope in your application process. If we're sending a message to these nonprofits, just because your project doesn't get approved this year doesn't mean that it can't get approved next year when those funds are more readily available in the next cycle. So just as a message to them that there's always next year.
Yeah.
What is the difference, the column that says expected amount available remainder of con plan, and it has about $50,000 more?
Yeah, next year's allocation will be a little bit higher than it is this year. So that's the remaining, that 700 and change number is the remaining amount for the 5th year of the con plan. So every year we're putting in how much is left to complete what we said we would do in this 5-year plan. So that's a changing number every year.
Any other questions from council before we open the public hearing? Thank you, Mindy. Okay, with that, we will open the public hearing for the draft fiscal year 2023-24 CDBG annual action plan for Middletown. If we have anyone who would like to speak in favor, please come up to the dais and state your name and address for the record. Seeing and hearing no movement, if we have anyone who would like to speak in opposition, please come up to the dais and state your name and address for the record. Okay, again, seeing no movement, we'll close the public hearing, and we will move on to council comments, since we already did our citizen comments. Mr. Farrow, would you like to go first?
Sure thing. Thanks, Mayor. So I just got back from Anaheim from a national real estate convention of 13,000 realtors. So that was fun. But I learned a few things that I'd like to kind of go over as far as when we look to the future of what Middletown and what it's going to look like, just some housing information. So first thing is the depreciation amount on a rental property is getting ready to change from 100% to 80% over 27 and a half years. So that's a bunch of numbers, but what does that mean? So if I go out and buy essentially a rental property, I will be able to depreciate that property only 4/5 of what it used to be. So the tax write-off for potential investor is not as high. Now, what does that mean to you and us, or me and you? First thing is you're going to get some of these long-time real estate holders that are going to want to sell off their properties because they're not going to be able to get the tax break they did before. So when you look at Middletown as a whole with a 48%-ish rental rate, I think you're going to start seeing some of those property investors start selling their properties off, which is, I think, what a lot of people in Middletown want. We want more home ownership, those types of things. Second thing, what that means, you're going to see some of these people that are investing hundreds of $millions into Texas and California and these types of areas. They're going to stop putting up these 300, 400, 500 unit properties, and with that opportunity for the people of Ohio and Illinois, Michigan, whatever, they're going to stop moving down there so much, is what they've told us at this real estate convention. So you're going to get some of the people, to Bob's point earlier, you're going to get some of the people that left Ohio for opportunity, they're going to start coming back. Another thing that they kind of told us was Austin, San Francisco, some of these markets that people left for tech, a lot of those people are starting to move out now. So essentially the Midwest with manufacturing, we still have these types of jobs, we're still doing very well with that. I think you're going to start seeing some of those people come back. And the last interesting stat that I looked up today was there were 435 members of the U.S. House of Representatives. That's all broken out by population. So in 1980, Ohio had 23 members. In 2000, we had 21. In 2010, we had 19. Today, we have 15. So essentially, Ohio has lost about 1/3 of its population control of the United States. So to bring this full circle, I think you're going to see Middletown and some of these manufacturing cities in Ohio, I think you're going to start to see a lot of these people come back. So when you talk about social media influencers and all these different things, which is what the future of my generation younger, what is Middletown going to do to be on the cutting edge of this? Which I know I laugh at it too, but I've got 23-year-old kids teaching 13,000 realtors how to do stuff. And when I started this business 10 years ago, that never would have happened. But I think it's important to note that things are getting ready to change, and I think they're going to change rapidly. And what are we going to do to be on the forefront of those things? And right now, people are spending more money on their children than ever in history, and I'm excited for Middletown that we're going to be a part of that growth by the highway with the ice rink and everything. So I think to come full circle, once again, to the airport hangar, I think if we can provide families things and opportunities for their kids to grow here, I think that's also going to be important. So that's all I have. Thanks. Sorry for nerding out.
Thank you. Ms. Nutty.
Hard to follow that one. I don't have as many statistics as you, but I have some news about some free trees. So,
Also important.
so we had our first park board meeting of the year, and we had new members and a quorum, which was very exciting. All of the members were very happy to be there and be involved with it. And staff told us about the 2023 tree giveaway that they partner with Keep Middletown Beautiful on. I checked the website, but I don't think that it's live yet. Paul, do you know when that will be?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
We'll have to ask
I
Ally.
think it'll be soon. So hopefully that'll be posted to the city's website and to our social medias as soon as it's available. The trees go very fast. They have a lot of different types of trees available for citizens. They do a really great job of tracking where the trees go and their progress, and they get photo updates from people who get trees in previous years and where they're planted and how they're doing. So they try to do a good job of keeping up with the metrics of the program, and it is one of the things that goes along with our Tree City status in Middletown. So keep on the lookout for that on our social medias. Also, there is a date set for the Arbor Day cleanup. It is going to be Saturday, April the 22nd, from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m., and they typically meet at Smith Park for that. So if you're interested, please mark your calendars and plan to be there and help out. On that same note, I think that one of the things that I notice, certainly as a citizen, but also as a business owner, the alleyways and the streets and how we as citizens are maintaining our public right-of-ways. It's just something as simple as holding onto your trash until you find a trash can and not throwing it out the window. I know this seems like a crazy concept, but it's really important. And when we talk about our youth and we talk about how we set an example for them and build up the next generation, we've got to be teaching our kids about how to take care of our earth and how they take care of our city and the amount of pride that it gives us to do that. So one of the other things that we talked about at Park Board was a program that Keep Middletown Beautiful is working on with the schools to get into our schools and talk to kids about recycling and about trash removal and all of these things that are very important to maintaining and keeping this beautiful city that we have in its best condition. So I just urge everyone to set a good example. Even if it's just going out in your own neighborhood on a nice day. Today was beautiful. Take a bag and a pair of gloves and just clean up your neighborhood and show your kids what that means. So I guess that's all I have for this evening, and thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Moon.
Yes, just one brief announcement. I did want to share that Kiwanis is doing their annual Book Around Middletown on March 4th. They're still looking for teams if anyone is interested. It's going to be at 2 p.m. starting here at the City Building. And if you're interested in registering, you can register at runsignup.com. That's all I have.
Thank you. That event is a lot of fun. I highly recommend it. Mr. Muterspaw.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a few quick things. First, Mr. Nolan, thanks for coming down, and I appreciate taking time to meet with me and Mr. Lally today. I think at the end of the day, when we talk about heated and so forth, we had 3 people at that table that has a passion for the city, and we all want to get here. We just have different ways of getting there, is what it is. So I appreciate you taking the time to come down and not eat, but have some coffee. I tried to get him to eat, he wouldn't eat. But so thank you for that, sincerely. The second thing is this is something for the public, is I've had lunch or coffee with 2 community members this week, and both of them mentioned the emergency measures that we have on our legislation. And I explained the best that I could that sometimes emergencies are a necessary evil. You have to do it. For example, if a grant's coming in and you don't have time and the chief gets it, he has to get it submitted. But other times, you know, I told him sometimes I don't know why we have the emergencies, other than the fact that we didn't have work completed on time. And with that in mind, you know, our staff has been cut 300 over the last 15 years, but maybe it's something we can consider in the future, really looking at that. I know it's tough and there's deadlines, but it seems like the public is seeing it more and more and asking about it. So I just want to make sure that we're on the level with all that, the best that we can be. I know staff works very hard to get these in, and I know it's not always easy, especially when you're working shorthanded, but that was brought up. So I just wanted to bring that to the public and your mind,
Okay.
just so you know.
Duly noted.
Thank you. The last thing I have, and really I could probably save this for new business, but I'll make it quick, but the mayor and I and Mr. Lally met with a group of citizens regarding an unfortunate double homicide we had in the city recently. And, you know, one of the comments brought up was about staffing for police. And I know it's hard to get staffing anywhere. I know whether you're in public works or firemen, IT, it doesn't matter. It's hard to hire people right now. The thing was brought up about the police department and their staffing, and the chief explained it pretty well on how the staffing works. But I want to point something out here in the crisis we're going through that I don't think America really knows. But when I got hired, and I know it was a long time ago here as a police officer, there was 365 people took the test, and they hired 5 of us out of 365. Chief, may I ask the chief a question?
Yes.
How many people did you have at your last test?
4 people showed up.
4. And at one point, we were in the 400s, then it went down to 200s. So after the chief has 4 people show up to take a test, and I know they advertise, and I know he sends out our officers to recruit, because they go to Central State, they go to the colleges, the high school, so I know they're doing their job with that. And I know the chief recruits, and they put it on their Facebook. But my point is, we have that many people that take this test, so after polygraph, physical testing, interview with the chief, interview with the panel board, you might have none that are qualified to be a police officer. So when the citizens ask, where's the police at, I can tell you they're doing the best they can with their staffing and their hiring. One thing that the mayor and I talked with, if you don't mind me speaking for you, we talked with the manager, is sponsoring for academies, which may cost us a little bit more money down the road. But right now, I can tell you most of the academies where they recruit, they're already sponsored. It means they're already paid to go to the academy. So an agency will hire them, pay them a recruit salary, put them in the academy. They have to stay for a full year. If they don't stay for the full year, they got to pay back the money to the municipality for the academy. And so that's one thing we discussed, just for the public to know. That's something we would consider with all of council and the manager's approval, of course. But we're trying anything we can to get recruits for the police department and other agencies. But I think that's a definite problem, and maybe that'll help you, and hopefully it will. Because those questions have been brought up, like how come it takes so long to get police in there? How long, you know, I'm not seeing them in my neighborhoods, because every time they hire somebody, it takes a year to train them. It's like with any job, really, it takes a long time. So I want to bring that up to the people that were asking at that meeting, since I don't see any of them here. but I thought it was important to note. Did I miss anything, Mayor, from that meeting?
I think that sounds about
Yeah.
right, yeah.
So those are things I just wanted to address really for the public more than anybody in the room. That's all I have.
I think our next meeting with that group is March 1st at 4 PM. Yeah.
4
So
PM.
our goal is to get some youth involved in the conversations, so that's a good thing. I just wanted to add a couple things from kind of Department of Health perspective. The One Ohio opioid settlement, we were, as a county, trying to get Butler County its own region designation. It looks like that's probably not going to happen. I think it's just too far down the road for that. That's the latest I've heard. So we may be stuck with the Region 14, I believe it is, that we're in right now, which means sharing dollars with a lot of rural areas that were not as heavily impacted as Middletown. So that's going to be a struggle definitely with those dollars, but we're working on it and trying to do everything we can to use those dollars as best as possible. Also, we're working regionally. I'm going to meet with Hamilton and Fairfield mayors at the end of March about just Tobacco 21 and the tobacco licensing. We're working on a program in Middletown to get tobacco licensing established. Hamilton's a little bit ahead of us on that. So we're kind of watching how that process is going with them. But they're saying that in Hamilton that they've got a lot of issues in schools with vaping. I'm certain that we have the same issues, and that they also are having issues with underage sales of tobacco to minors. So anyway, we're meeting as communities to try to figure that out. But if anyone has anecdotal or factual information about the effects of vaping on our youth and wants to share any of that with me, I welcome you to send me an email, and I'd love to hear about it so I can share it with the regional mayors, and we can work to keep the vaping down in our youth and keep them healthier. And that's all I have this evening, which brings us to city manager reports.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. The first thing I want to bring up, and Amy, did we set a date to the July 4th meeting to switch that to?
We discussed it internally, and typically, my experience has been that when it falls on a meeting date, that we would just have it the following day. It's certainly council's prerogative to set it any day that you like, but the July meeting falls on the 4th, so typically we would set it for the next day, the Wednesday, keep it on the same week, and have it Wednesday, July the 5th. But obviously, it's council's prerogative, but we just, it's nice to kind of get it settled, and that way if people are taking vacations or things like that, people know ahead of time. But we know nothing has been decided.
Okay, nothing.
Works for me.
July 5th
Fifth
work
works
for
for me,
everybody?
It's fine for me.
You won't be in Anaheim or?
Well, it's early. Got a lot of months to figure something out.
Do you need me to send an official request to change that, or how does that work?
And we can certainly just have a special meeting for the purpose of regular business.
Is that what that would be?
Yeah, I think we would need either two members or you, Mayor.
Okay, I'll send an email requesting. We have a special meeting for
For the regular
purposes
meeting.
of
Regular business.
Regular business, got it.
Yeah, so anytime we have a meeting that's not on the regular day, on the regular time, it's a special meeting.
Okay, July 5th. Awesome. Thank you, Amy. And Brody. Thank you for that. All right, next on the agenda for City Manager's Report, I want to introduce Nikita Lancaster, our Assistant Director of Public Work, and she's going to give council 2 updates of public works projects, where we're at on the CSO basin, and the construction of a new water tower in the Armbruster Nature Preserve area.
Hello. So I picked these 2 projects, bottom line up front, because they're going to improve or make meaningful impacts to the community. Some might be more popular than others, but we wanted to make you and citizens aware of that sooner rather than later. So the first one's the downtown CSO storage project. Most of you guys are familiar with that, but I'll run through a little background and we'll talk about the landscape feature. For people that are less familiar with it, it's a requirement in the city's long-term control plan to reduce combined sewer overflows. It's going to be a large storage basin buried underground, 5.1 million gallons. We're planning to start construction later this year, August-September timeframe, with the goal of substantial completion December 2025. and we've just passed the 30% milestone for design. And I guess I want to pause on the substantial completion. Substantial completion is really going to be when the facility is operational. So when I'm talking about the landscape architecture stuff, that might not be done in December 2025. As you guys saw with Central Avenue, that's probably substantially complete, but we still have a lot of the aesthetic stuff to clean up. So with the landscape feature, I wanted to start with some of the key constraints that we have. This wasn't just like a open palette that we could do whatever we wanted with. So it is on top of a CSO storage tank. We want the surface improvements to be scaled appropriately for a sewer project, so we don't want to just go crazy and do all kinds of fancy stuff. And the third bullet there is to minimize the impact to the project budget overall. So we did meet internally and get some input from different departments on what that space might look like. We landed on trying to do simple multi-purpose stuff, maybe design in some things that later, if the city wanted to invest some money there, there's ways that you could kind of transform the space a little bit without dramatic retrofits. So without further ado, this didn't come through very well, but I can make sure you guys get a high resolution version of this. The first thing I want to do is kind of maybe walk through some of the more like CSO storage basin pieces of this, because there is a CSO tank underneath there. So we are going to have infrastructure on top that supports that CSO basin, and I guess none of this actually highlights it. So kind of on the top portion of the screen there, we have a screening wall that'll be there between the CSO property and the Essity property. There's a driveway back there so that maintenance personnel can get back there for maintenance. There's a mechanical room in the top left. I really apologize for the resolution here. And then kind of going from that mechanical room across the screen there, what you're seeing are those smaller rectangles, and those are tipping buckets that'll flush the CSO storage basin after an event. We've also got some other features there, like there's a pump station called out, there's some access hatches sprinkled throughout, so all of that's really to support what's underneath, and we've got different means there for maintenance crews to access the CSO storage basin. One of the prominent features there, sort of the bottom right, is stormwater detention basin. So this is going to collect all the stormwater runoff from the site, convey that to the hydraulic canal. And then just above that, we have an event lawn, which is really just an open-ended space. I think we kind of contemplated the fact that this was across the street from the YMCA. Maybe they'd want to do some outdoor yoga, fitness classes, things like that, so that could be useful for them. And kind of just to the left of the event lawn, there's a space there where we could maybe put the portable stage. So if we wanted to host like outdoor concerts or events like that, there would be space available. So it wouldn't be permanent infrastructure that's there for that purpose, but it would accommodate that if we wanted to use it for that purpose. And then moving over to the left there, we've got multi-purpose athletic space. So we've contemplated having pickleball courts, basketball court. And I think the thinking is that maybe this would also dual purpose for the ice skating rink in the wintertime, that would be a good location for it where we wouldn't be doing lawn damage and sort of get that to have a permanent resting place.
Is that basketball court area as large as the current, have you guys
I think
scaled that
so.
against the current size of their ice skating rink?
I think so. I think that we gave them that feedback and they worked that in. I don't have a dimension drawing of that to confirm that, but I think that's the feedback we gave them.
I thought they wanted to do roller skating or something else in the summer.
Yeah, and when we met with the design consultant and kind of went over some alternatives, we looked at trying to build in some sort of roller skating feature here, and I think that just kind of...
I mean, I think we agreed to approve those dollars based on the fact that it was a year-round use, that rink. I thought.
So I think the way that the rink works is that when the ice is not in the rink, the rink itself is a roller skating rink.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Well, I don't think any of this has to.
No,
I mean, this is 2.5 years out, so.
Well,
And that's part of why we're presenting a 30% design, because our
Right.
goal is to make sure that if there is feedback, that we can incorporate that before we advance the 60% design. So it is why we're presenting it.
We
not
haven't
presenting-
allocated those dollars officially, have we, for the rink? I don't think we voted on that yet, did we?
I don't think so.
No, we have not voted on
Okay.
spending the rink. We did commit to purchasing it, yes, but we have not brought that forward to you in legislation yet. So what we discussed at the work session was, instead of using ARPA dollars for it, we would take it out of a couple other funds that we have.
Right, okay. If it's a 3-month-a-year item instead of full year, that's going to make a difference on my vote about using those dollars. So,
Yeah, we're fully
thought.
aware of these plans. These actually came out before we even considered the ice arena, and even if that's where that's going to go.
and I like the basketball courts and pickleball court, don't get me wrong. I just
Right.
want to make sure we're
Yeah,
including all.
no, it's good feedback. There are some renderings here that probably aren't going to come through very well, but you can see there's that pavilion space that's just south of the pickleball courts that would have tables and chairs and some lighting underneath there. And you can get a better appreciation for what that stormwater feature looks like. It's not, it's not a big feature. It's kind of just a dry detention basin to make sure we're capturing the runoff and conveying it. So it's a work in progress.
Nikita, what about, I'm just curious, like it says temporary stage, what would be the price difference to put a permanent stage there?
I'm not sure what those go for, but we could look into it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would that
Oh,
be
yeah.
mostly like electrical and those
Yeah,
sort
that's
of
what I'm-
components?
there's
I
definitely a
mean,
cost. I
there's
just-
not much difference in, if you look at Governor Square,
Right.
I mean, the crew from the Bash could probably tell you how much of an investment they had to put into that to make it.
Yeah, well, I was thinking like the Sunset concert in the parks. I mean, they did 3 last year, they're gonna do 4 or 5 this year, but Public Works did a nice job of helping them getting that set up, like a stage. But if there was a permanent one down there, then Public Works wouldn't have to go out and set up, it would be there. I'm just talking.
Yeah, and I mean, our thinking was to leave it super flexible so that it's not a defined space.
Okay.
But
That makes sense.
if we kind of get enough feedback to support making it more of a defined space, we can move in that direction, so.
Cool.
I would say from a parks perspective, the pickleball too, I'm curious, are there enough courts there to make it, how many courts do we have at Lefferson?
18?
18?
18?
So this would just be sort of like, oh, if you want to go have fun and play pickleball, like it's not
Yeah,
enough
we're
to
not-
move a
we're not
league
trying
there
to
or do
compete
anything
with
like that,
the
just,
Lefferson pickleball
Yeah.
at all, no. I think a lot of it is, the idea that YMCA is there, we have the bike path connected to this, so, if people wanted to ride their bikes in and have something to do downtown, there'd be some things to do.
I do like the idea of it being sort of a mixed use, that it's got green space and stage and all of that, in addition to the possibility to have some hard structures,
Yep.
like whatever kind of court or athletic feature we decide.
Yeah.
Just curious, and I don't know what the price difference would be, and you're not going to off the top of your head, but grass versus turf, like artificial turf there long term, I think that'd be a really nice high-end look.
To have artificial instead of real grass?
Right.
Okay.
It'd be less long-term maintenance, I would assume, with Public Works as well.
Don't they have that at Austin Landing?
Yeah, that's what people want. So if we're gonna try to make it a destination, make it a destination.
Yep, that's good feedback too. I know our parks and grounds people would appreciate that comment as well, yeah.
Yeah, well, in Liberty Center, like when I go to Liberty Center, I mean, kids are just doing cartwheels on the turf and everything there, and I don't know.
Yeah, you
I
never
could
get
see that being mud
muddy,
everywhere.
So I could see the benefit of that. Yeah, we'll look into it.
Does our public Wi-Fi reach, I would assume it would reach here, this park area? Would be something to think about if we need to have a boost from Central Avenue or something.
Yeah,
Or even from Smith Park.
Yeah.
I don't know which
Yeah.
would be easier.
well, we're also a stone's throw away from the city building too, so
Yeah.
we're not that far.
And I like the idea of these pergolas. I mean, I feel like if we're talking about comparing something like this to the features at Austin Landing and that, like swings and the kind of things, like, I mean, if it had some sort of like adult and kids swings. I feel like everybody likes swings now, so just throwing
Yeah,
that
and
out
when we were
there.
kind of looking at the ranges of opportunities, that was included in more of the high-end range of what we could do. And we were like, okay, well, now we're pricing ourselves out of, but
As
we
opposed to
could-
just like a basic wooden pergola.
Yeah.
Okay.
But, yeah, I mean, we can pick and choose some of those things, so if that's something we can definitely consider. Okay, that's all I've got on the downtown CSO project. The water storage tank, probably gonna spend a little bit more time on background here, because I don't think that we've talked much about this with you guys, and then talk about the neighborhood impacts. When the natural gas power plant came online, well, shortly before that, the city did a water distribution planning study to find out if we had the water infrastructure to support that. It was estimated then that their usage was going to be something like 4 million gallons a day. Since they came online, I think it's closer to 2 million gallons a day. Ohio EPA did a sanitary survey in 2021, and in those sanitary surveys, they just take a hard look at our water infrastructure and make sure that we're doing everything that we need to do and providing what we need to provide. They recommended that we add additional above-ground storage, specifically in the blue ball pressure zone. It's the industry standard to have average daily flow above ground. Right now, we have average daily flow, but like 4 million gallons of that sits below ground in a reservoir. And we do have backup power for those pumps, but it's still not pure gravity flow if we lost power for everything. So the recommended water storage volume from them was 1.5 million gallons. So we've spent a lot of time looking at where we might put the water storage tank, and there's some key considerations involved in that. The needs to work hydraulically bullet, I don't know that I worded everything there great, but essentially the purpose of that is that we have existing transmission lines, pump stations, distribution piping, that's all sized for certain flows. So the key there was really trying to tie into that existing infrastructure as much as possible so that we don't have to build a new pump station to convey water to a storage tank or new conveyance piping. The second bullet is needs to serve pressure zones that do not have sufficient above ground storage. That's really to say that if we need more storage to serve blue ball, we can't put it at a low point in the system anywhere. We can't put it down south in our system because it won't flow by gravity to serve the blue ball pressure zone. Land availability is obviously a consideration, and cost. Costs are specific to the additional infrastructure that might be needed. So we looked at some property near the existing blue ball water storage tanks, which was pricey. I think the price that we saw was around $1 million, so we started looking at other places. We considered where the Kensington pump station is. That's by Sherman and Kensington. We do have that 4 million gallon below ground reservoir there, and some ground area that's available to put a water storage tank, but that would really dramatically transform that scenery there because there's not already above ground storage.
Nikita, at one time, was there an above ground water storage in that location?
I think you might be right, but that like predates my time. Yeah, I would.
I grew up in the neighborhood, and they call it the water tower or hill, and so I don't remember it, but I always gathered that there at one time was an above ground
Oh, interesting.
there. I just wasn't sure if anybody knew that.
I don't know. So we then went to up near the Manchester water storage tank that we have up there. Even though that's not directly in the blue ball pressure zone, this location is actually pretty advantageous because we can open a valve that connects the two pressure zones, and we can serve blue ball pressure zone from Manchester if we lose pumping capacity to blue ball. And then it also gives us the opportunity to build some extra storage up in the Manchester pressure zone, because right now we're kind of right at that edge of having just enough storage for the average daily flow in the Manchester pressure zone. So this gives us a little bit more flexibility. We can add a little bit extra storage and serve a couple pressure zones there. But nobody likes their backyard torn up, so here's a sort of zoomed out view so you can get oriented to where this is if you're not familiar. And then we'll zoom in. So this will be right up there off Autumn Drive. And they did make that a nature preserve up there, and you can see the walking trail that's around there. So our plan would be to put the new Manchester storage tank just west of the existing tank. Try to keep as much of a perimeter of trees as possible, just so that we have access for construction, access for maintenance and stuff like that. But that's what we're looking at. You know, that's probably not popular, but you know, as we talked a lot, I don't think there's a popular location for a water storage tank. So try to pick the most logical one and throw it out there. So any feedback on that? Okay. All right, that's all I have.
Thank you.
Were there any
Anything else?
questions? Okay, that's all I have.
If we get a logo put on it, can we make sure the water isn't above the ground like the one on Blue Ball?
Yeah.
If anyone doesn't know, our logo is not quite right, that water tower. Little small fact for you.
The riverway at the bottom is flipped upside down.
Yeah.
Nathan had a plan to put fire stations at the bottom of those water towers.
You and those fire stations.
He says they do it in Dublin, but
Now, I do think there will be some feedback from the neighborhood. It's a pretty established neighborhood. Those homes are
yeah.
going to be pretty close to the construction of a new water tower. One is one thing, but two is, it'll be interesting to get the feedback.
Maybe we'll get some cellular companies to put antennas up there and they'll have better cellular service, so.
I guess I do have one question. What is, in what situations is it more feasible to do the underground storage basin as opposed to these above ground? I mean, like, if we're talking about the Kensington Water Station, what's to say
Not an
that
expert on
this
it, but
new
I'd say
one
that'd
couldn't
be a land availability.
couldn't be buried?
issue.
I don't, what is is there a huge cost difference? Just,
Well, Ohio EPA's recommendation is above-ground storage, and that's just because if it's below ground in a reservoir, it's going to require pumping to get out in the system.
even if it's at that high point?
Yeah, I mean, even if we're up by Manchester, it's not high enough at that point to not need
Okay.
pumping.
Okay, I just wanted to ask because we've talked about both different kinds so that the neighborhood is aware that there's only one that we're able to build.
And did you explore a larger one as opposed to two smaller, or is there only one size, or?
We did talk about that. I think part of that's a constructability argument. So if we wanted to like take down the one that's in Manchester and put up a larger storage tank, I mean, technically we could, but the constructability of that's, like, we can't take one tank offline for some period of time to construct another one, so, yeah.
Like you could probably build a larger one and then eventually take the other one down, or?
At that point, it probably gets closer to the houses in general, though, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, so right now we're at like a 2 million gallon storage tank. So if we got rid of the other one, that would need to be a 3 million gallon storage tank. I think there's some advantage to having two tanks. I mean, it's less than ideal, but you know, then you can take one down for maintenance to clean it and paint it and still have storage. So
That makes sense.
no popular answers.
More options and more answers is probably better for the citizens. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Lawley, anything else for city manager reports?
That's it. That's all I have.
Thank you. Ms. Gank, will you please present the consent agenda for us?
For your consideration this evening, we have to approve the city council minutes from January the 17th and February the 7th, 2023. To receive and file the following board and commission minutes: the Planning Commission from November 19th, 2022, the Board of Zoning Appeals from December 7th, 2022, the Board of Health from January 10th, 2023. To receive and file oaths of office for Marcus Hall, Eric Mertz, Burley Simpson, and Brett Vance. To accept resignations from the following board and commissions: Joanne Mios Yancey from the Historic Commission and Beth Birch from the Cemetery Board, and to appoint the following board and commission members: To the Building and Housing Appeals Board, Mike Taylor, Kevin Puckett, Rita Ratliff, and Dennis Beatty.
I would like to motion that the matters listed under the consent agenda be considered routine and enacted by one motion and one vote of consent.
Second?
Ms. Cantu, please call the roll.
Mr. Moon,
Yes.
Mr. Muederspaw,
Yes.
Mayor Condrey,
Yes.
Ms. Nenny,
Yes.
Mr. Farrell.
Yes.
For the motion agenda item, we have to approve the purchase of a 2022 KCE 580SN backhoe loader from Southeastern Equipment Company, Incorporated of Monroe, Ohio, in the amount of $118,485.16 to be shared between the Parks and Grounds and the Stormwater Divisions.
So moved for adoption?
Second.
Ms. Cantu, please call the roll.
Mr. Muederspaw,
Yes.
Mayor Condrey,
Yes.
Mr. Farrell,
Yes.
Ms. Nenny,
Yes.
Mr. Moon.
Yes.
Okay, we're ready for legislation.
Great, thank you. Before we get started on the legislative agenda tonight, I do want to ask for a motion to waive the charter requirements requiring 2 readings and 30 days to enactment for resolution number R 2023-04, which is the first item, and the 5th item, which is ordinance number O 2023-15.
Just out of clarification, R 2023-04 is a second reading emergency,
Oh,
correct?
never mind then.
It is, yeah, I was going, sorry.
Then just number 5, then, my apologies.
But it is, so we do
It
need
is an
to-
emergency.
Yeah, I just, the verbiage.
But this is the
Yep.
second time that we're reading it as an
Yeah,
emergency.
fair enough.
I would like to move that the resolution number R 2023-04 and ordinance number O 2023-15 be considered an emergency measure and read one time only.
Or 2 times.
Second?
Okay, Ms. Cantu, please call the roll.
Mayor Condrey,
Yes.
Mr. Farrell,
Yes.
Ms. Nenny,
Yes.
Mr. Moon,
Yes.
Mr. Muederspaw.
Yes.
Great, thanks. The first legislative item tonight is resolution number R 2023-04, a resolution authorizing the city manager to file an application with the U.S. Department of Transportation for a grant under the Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity Discretionary Grant Program and declaring an emergency.
So moved for adoption?
Second.
Mr. Lawley?
Just a reminder, council, this is for the Transportation Master Plan to apply for the grant. I don't have anything further to add.
Any comments or questions from council? Okay, Ms. Cantu, please call the roll.
Mr. Farrell,
Yes.
Ms. Nenny,
Yes.
Mr. Moon,
Yes.
Mr. Muederspaw,
Yes.
Mayor Condrey.
Yes.
Next is ordinance number O 2023-11, an ordinance authorizing an amendment to the small business grant agreement between the City of Middletown and Ohio Soda LLC. This is a second reading.
So moved for adoption?
Second.
Nothing further to add on this.
Any comments or questions from council on this one? Okay, Ms. Cantu, please call the roll.
Ms. Nenny,
Yes.
Mr. Moon,
Yes.
Mr. Muederspaw,
Yes.
Mayor Condrey,
Yes.
Mr. Farrell.
Yes.
Item number 3 is ordinance number O 2023-12, an ordinance authorizing the submission of an application for federal assistance, an action plan, and a projected use of funds under Title I of the Housing and Community Development Act of 1974, as amended for a program year 2023. This is a first reading.
First reading. Mr. Lawley, would you like to
Nothing
comment any further? This is the
No
public
further
hearing item.
comments.
Okay, any other additional comments or questions from council at this time? Okay.
Next is ordinance number O 2023-13, declaring the improvement of certain real property located in the city of Middletown, Warren County, Ohio, to be a public purpose, declaring such property to be exempt from real property taxation, designating specific public infrastructure improvements that, once made, will directly benefit the parcels for which improvement is declared to be a public purpose, requiring annual service payments in lieu of taxes, establishing a municipal public improvement tax increment equivalent fund, authorizing payments to the Franklin City School District and the Warren County Career Center, providing related authorizations pursuant to Ohio Revised Code sections 57009.40B, 5709.42, 5709.43, 5709.832, and 5709.85. This is a first reading.
Mr.
I
Lawler.
will let Assistant City Manager Nathan Cahill discuss this with you. It's his project.
Lord help us here. Before you tonight, Mayor, members of council, is an ordinance that would establish a new TIF district. The territory involved is all of the undeveloped land north of Atrium Hospital. So it takes what we would call the Union Wren Farm parcels and the like. This is to set the stage for capturing those incremental property tax dollars for the future infrastructure needs of this area, as well as other areas around the 75-122 interchange region to the benefit of the city. Just as kind of some background on this as well, notices have been provided to both the Franklin City School District as well as the Career Center. This is a 100% non-school TIF, so that means that any exempted payments in lieu of taxes that are provided to the city will be net of what the school district and the Career Center would have normally collected and received had it not been for the TIF exemption being in place.
Was there a specific goal for this region and the TIF, or are we just setting this up for unknown?
There are longer-term goals that the future development of this area and TIFing that area will allow for improvements along the Union Road corridors, along with the extension of water and sewer and storm infrastructure in the future as it's needed, as well as you'll see the ordinance is drafted in a manner that, much like at least 4 other TIFs in the vicinity of the interchange, there are public improvements that can be funded through this TIF that are off-site to the benefit of that corridor.
Is it mainly because it's in need of public infrastructure improvements, and that's really what, I mean, we could TIF every area in the city if we wanted, so why, I guess my question is why this one?
Yeah, so there are a couple of drivers on this one. One is, what you just said, Mayor Condrey, is for the support of future development in this vicinity of the city. Secondly, it was thought prudent to capture the incremental increase. The Kendall Group multifamily development broke ground and is currently under construction. That lies outside of the TIF district for the hospital, the original hospital TIF, although it's tied into that whole development area. And like I said, this can also be used to raise dollars for off-site improvements, whether that be in the interchange area, whether that be further down Union Road along 122. The ordinance is rather expansive for the use of those dollars.
Okay, so it does include the Kendall Group's development?
Yes, ma'am.
Any other comments or questions from council?
Just in layman's terms, so this basically is just setting us up for the grand scheme of everything going on out there.
Yes.
That is
Yeah.
correct.
This is
just
just
it's a piece of the pie.
yeah. So this is think of it as this is just a you're at the fishing lake and you're throwing out your lure, and it's a 30-year cast. So it's a rolling 30-year TIF, and as things develop in this region of the city, they would be exempted for a 30-year period of time.
I always love Nathan's comparisons.
Okay, I think we're ready for the next.
Great. The final item tonight is ordinance number O 2023-15, an ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into a preliminary development agreement with Woodward Development LLC and Warren County Port Authority for the development of a certain real property as a mixed-use development anchored by an arena and event center and declaring an emergency.
So move for adoption.
Second.
Mr. Love.
Once again, I'm going to defer to Nathan, and I will say, Councilman Muterswall, this is one of those times where things come up from the previous week meetings on the project at 122 and Union Road that things come up and we need to move quickly on. I'll let Nathan explain this part of the project.
Thank you, Paul. So as council will remember, the city is involved in the planning and development along with other partners, including Warren County and the Warren County Port Authority, to develop the property at the southeast corner of Union Road and 122. Consistent with our discussions with council, before you tonight is a preliminary development agreement that creates the legal framework and assigns the roles and responsibilities of all the parties involved for the planned development of this project. There are 3 parties to this development agreement, one being the city, obviously, Woodard Development, and the Warren County Port Authority. As the preliminary development agreement draft in front of you states, it assigns the roles and responsibilities as we move forward towards a final development agreement as we approach closing on the property, that these are the assignments that each of the 3 parties are asked and required to start working on and finalizing. So from the city's standpoint, the city is saying that it's part of the equation is to assemble the remainder of the land, to work towards the creation of a new TIF district on the property, cooperate in the creation of a new community authority, and some other odds and ends. Woodard Development, as the developer, seeking to develop the non-arena portion of the development site, is pledging to do the things that are in this preliminary development agreement, and understanding that any future bond issuance by the city will be predicated on there being minimum service guarantees for that debt that's supported by the new development and personal and business guarantees of that entity. And then finally, with the Port Authority is taking the lead on the financing of the event center portion of the property, and that is memorialized as to what they're bringing to the table to effectuate the financing of that part of the project. This is being brought to you tonight so that you can feel a little more comfortable as we have another earnest money deadline approaching, that the 3 main parties here are in agreement with a framework to start finalizing the financing package. As you're aware, the planning and zoning process is proceeding with this project, and actually will be in front of this body later next month for your input and blessing or not. And this just now firmly solidifies what the roles and responsibilities of the 3 parties involved, and also allows for a document to reference as we are securing commitments from end users and end entities for this project. And with that, I'm happy to answer anybody's questions.
Nathan, just looking forward, I'm seeing on section 1 on page 2, final development agreement on or before July 28th, 2023. Other than what's going to come out of Planning Commission, would that be the next public item that would come, and would that be the final thing, or where are we looking at down the road the rest of the year as far as the timeline?
Great question. So we've mapped out as a group, the development team has mapped out a project schedule here. And so when we are talking about legislative action requests by this body, you're right that before that date, and that is the date of the proposed closing on the Fisher land, that there would be a final development agreement amongst all the parties that's fully binding and enforceable, so that we can move forward to final bond issuance. In the interim, prior to then, there may be the need to start the process of the creation of the new community authority that would become effective upon closing on the property and development occurring, as well as the creation of the TIF district. We are on track then past that date, if all the stars align, as we hope they do, that we would be putting together the bond financing package from the city's standpoint that would be TIF backed and developer backstopped. That would happen later, probably the middle of the 4th quarter of this year, for a closing on what the city would be doing, as well as what the Port Authority would be financing in its name, that will all close before the end of the year, so that then construction could start 1st quarter of 24.
I just want to make sure I'm reading this right. So in the case of the revenue not covering the operating expenses at the what are we calling it, entertainment complex? The event center portion, it's the way that I read this, that would be the Warren County Port Authority would be responsible for covering the difference.
That is how we have negotiated so far to create that firewall, knowing the concerns of council on that matter. So that's what
Obviously, we don't ever expect or want it to get to that
no,
point, but I like to.
no. And I will say this, that in our working towards a final arrangement on this, a lot of this is preparing for potential worst case scenarios, in that the financing of the event center, the underwriting of that is calling for quite the debt coverage ratio that's well above and beyond what debt service would be to demonstrate revenues are covering that. And that we've made sure that in this framework, and as we will continue to move forward, that the city's investment is for the infrastructure, for the entire project, backstopped by guarantees of the developer, for the non-event area, and that the NCA would be used as a credit enhancement, a credit facility for any debt coverage issues into the future that the Port Authority would be putting its name to.
So if the TIF were not to cover the infrastructure improvements, the developer is guaranteeing minimum payment.
That is correct. That is correct. And that will be part of our final development agreement, as well as any eventual official offer or official statement of any bond offering.
It looks well constructed, so thank you,
We
appreciate it.
try.
Any other comments or questions from council? It's exciting, it's moving forward, hopefully.
I will say, just to share from the Planning Commission meeting, I know, Mayor, you were there, and I think I saw Tal there, but just to share how that went. We did have one citizen comment come through later in the conversation. It was the only person, I think, from the Renaissance neighborhood that they even received an email from. And her home backed up against what, at that time in the initial designs, was it was laid out to be townhomes, and they were a little bit closer, but the developer changed the design to have a different type of multifamily closer to the Renaissance neighborhood, and she was very happy with that and appreciated the considerations by the developer. And that was really the only citizen feedback that we had out of that meeting, where the Planning Commission did approve to recommend unanimously to approve this. So just for that perspective.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Okay, Ms. Skank, you'll please call the roll.
Mr. Moon?
Yes.
Mr. Muederspaw?
Yes.
Mayor Condrey?
Yes.
Ms. Nenny?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Okay, that brings us to new business. Does anyone have any items for new business?
I'm about to beat a dead horse, but any update on vacant lots? Well, I guess first thing, any update on like the vacant lots as far as getting those into potential developers' hands? And then the second thing is, I brought this up last year, probably about this time, and we can have a discussion on it. And I think Ashley, you guys are involved with it. But as far as the minimum square footage build right now requirement in Middletown for new construction is 1,500. I can't remember what I brought up. It was maybe 1,400. I've talked to a couple people on zoning and a couple of different people in general. I think overall they are positive on it somewhat, as long as it's built with the right quality. So I just wanted to get an update on that and see if we had any thoughts or who would need to be involved in that.
So no updates yet on the vacant lots that will be coming with the revitalization plan that will be coming forth. And as a matter of fact, sometime soon, within the next week, we'll be giving you a sample survey of what we want to send out to the general public on what they want to see in the neighborhood revitalization and things such as that that you mentioned. And that will be coming to you in the next week or so. to get your opinions on it before we release it out to what the community wants to see on the neighborhood revitalization.
Okay. Only reason I ask is, sorry, rates are going down, cost of building is going down. You're seeing more, at least from my experience, you're seeing more multiple offers on homes right now. So overall, the market's starting to go back up. So hopefully, going forward, the demand's going to continue. And if people want to be here, as far as working from home, we're keeping those tax dollars now in Middletown. So I don't want to see it lay by the wayside for another year.
It's coming soon.
Sounds good.
Good evening. Just really quickly, I wanted to talk about square footage and housing. The minimum requirement for a single-story home in Middletown for single-family dwelling is 1,500 square feet. Staff does internally have the ability to grant a 10% waiver to that, which gets you down to 1,350, but that's the minimum that you're able to build in town without an area and dimensional waiver from the BZA. We did put a proposal in front of Planning Commission right after I started with zoning to try and bring those square footages down just a little bit, because we were having quite a lot of requests for 1,100 or 1,200 square foot homes. And at the time, at least, Planning Commission was absolutely not interested in lowering their square footages for single family dwellings.
How many years ago was that?
I've been in zoning now about 2 years, so it's just been in the last 18 months.
Yeah, it was maybe a year ago.
Yeah.
I know I don't think it was last year, though. I could be wrong.
No, I'd say it was probably 21. So we're not quite at 2 years yet from when that happened.
And I'm not saying I'm right, but would it do any due diligence to, as there's a new planning commission, bring it up in front of them?
Yeah, we're
as far as what our
Deborah, I think that was brought up in front of all of the current sitting members of the Planning Commission.
I can tell you, in my experience, they have not been interested in lowering the square footages.
We have a lot of houses in Middletown under 1,400 square feet.
Yeah, I mean, if that's something that there's appetite for and you would like
Well, I'm
us to
saying,
put
do we
that through
need
the
more?
gamut, then-
Why?
I would say that that was the Planning Commission's argument, that we don't need more smaller homes in Middletown.
Because the city we are paying to mow vacant lots of properties that cannot be built upon according to what our restrictions are right now. So first thing I would say is, do we want to turn a liability into an asset for a city? The second thing I would say is, if you can go in there and sell a new home at a higher price point, if you just sprinkle them in one by two, if it raises the price values, that's good for the whole entire neighborhood.
Deborah, you guys have been working on an inventory of our vacant side lots, correct? And identifying which ones meet the requirements for new home construction versus the ones that don't. Do you have any numbers for us of how many of these lots there might be?
I don't have information right now. I could get that for you if it's something that you'd like to see. We just got the side lot program split to differentiate between lots that are going to be considered buildable and lots that aren't. But as far as a comprehensive inventory of anything above, say, 40 or 50 feet wide that could potentially be built on, I don't have a list like that could be provided to you, but we're definitely working on an inventory.
So let's say we have side lot, can't put a 1,500 square foot house on it, can't put a 10% waiver house on it, so
1350.
They could go to BZA and get a variance.
They could.
Okay, so done, right? It
Well,
doesn't-
Or it could be
not-
sold
it's
as
not
a
that
side
simple.
lot to an existing
Well,
home
they
who
could apply
would
for a
take over the
variance to go to
maintenance.
BZA.
Right, so it's
But as
not
a
like we have
builder
to
going
make
to
it-
waste their time and go through that process, you have to, in my case,
Well, we shouldn't change it for the whole city, just for a few vacant side lots, because now we're allowing a whole development to go in with, I don't know, 30-foot frontage and.
You thought what's vacant
Well, I
lots?
mean, there could potentially be
yeah.
a text amendment to the code, because those lots that you're discussing are called out specific. They're
There's
legal
been a property on them
non-conforming
before.
lots. They could have a different set of regulation than just, say, regular platted lots that were of a size that met the code. So it is possible to have one of those things and not the other. If you wanted to specify that only single-family dwellings that were built on legal non-conforming lots could be 1,200 square feet.
And maybe that's worth
If they
bringing to
meet the
planning.
frontage and if they
Yes.
meet all these
Yeah,
other
that's a
requirements.
possibility that maybe hits the best of
Right, because I'm
what
not
we're
sure,
looking
I don't
I
think
think
people
that
are
sounds
against.
like a compromise that.
I'm fine with
may-
that. I only want
maybe
them on
Planning
there.
Commission would be more open-minded to.
Well,
If they
and
were, if that was
your-
specific to,
policy drivers, if that's a text amendment that you would like us to look into and put in front of planning commission, we'll be happy to do that.
I mean, what looks better, a vacant lot with tall grass or a high-quality workforce housing, which we know that's an issue in Middletown, right? So we
Maybe
can
it
solve
could
No
two
in the
needs.
grass.
Brought up as new business at the next planning commission meeting. That way there's not time put into it with,
sure, I think that would be nice.
Yeah, we absolutely can gauge the kind
At
of,
least gauge planning commission's
interest.
appetite for it and see
Absolutely.
where they all are and see if we can get a recommendation from them about how they feel.
be happy to do it.
And then I can bring that back to council at the next city council meeting after we discuss at planning commission, if that works out timing wise, unless you'd like an update sooner than that.
That works.
Okay.
And I would be curious if you get the information, how many side lots are going to be available
Absolutely.
for such a discussion?
yeah.
It'd be interesting
Yeah,
to
if we
see.
could get that in
if-
time for the discussion, that would be helpful.
If we were to do that potentially, how many more side lots that would put into, which I think is what you're saying as well.
Right.
but just
I'll
how
be
many
happy to
more
get that information and we'll get it in front of planning commission and we'll gauge the interest. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Deborah.
Thanks, Deborah.
Any other new business items? Okay, we have a request to move to executive session under the authority of ORC 121.22G1 to consider the appointment of a public official. Do we have a motion to move to executive session?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Kank, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Muederspaw,
Yes.
Mayor Condrey,
Yes.
Mr. Farrell,
Yes.
Ms. Nenny,
Yes.
Mr. Moon.
Yes.
Okay, I don't believe we plan to vote on anything after. Am I accurate on that? I know Mr. McCrabb always wonders. I don't even know what this is for, so. Okay, I don't anticipate voting on anything. So with that, our next meeting will be March 7th. Does that sound right? It's 5:30 PM here in council chambers. Until then, blue skies over Middletown.